In this video, we're going to study Aesop's fable of the ant and the fly. We study this fable in lesson 10 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's course on Aesop's fable. We'll read through this fable, which is a little bit longer than most of the fables, talk about the moral or meaning of it, and then discuss a little bit how we might apply it to our lives to benefit from the study of this fable. So let's read together the fable of the ant and the fly. An ant and a fly one day disputed or argued with each other as to their respective merits, their different strengths and benefits that they enjoy. So the ant and the fly had an argument. "Vile creeping insect," said the fly to the ant, "can you for a moment compare yourself with me? I soar on the wing like a bird. I enter the palaces of kings, and alight or land on the heads of princes, nay, of emperors, and only quit them to adorn the yet more attractive brow of beauty. Besides, I visit the altars of the gods. Not a sacrifice is offered, but is first tasted by me. Every feast, too, is open to me. I eat and drink of the best, instead of living for days on 2 or 3 grains of corn as you do." "All that's very fine," replied the ant, "but listen to me. You boast of your feasting, but you know that your diet is not always so choice, and you are sometimes forced to eat what nothing should induce me to touch. As for alighting on the heads of kings and emperors, you know very well that whether you pitch on the head of an emperor or of an ass, and it is as often on the one as the other, you're shaken off from both with impatience. And then the altars of the gods indeed. There and everywhere else, you are looked upon as nothing but a nuisance. In the winter, too, while I feed at my ease on the fruit of my toil, what more common than to see your friends dying with cold, hunger, and fatigue? I lose my time talking to you. Chattering will fill neither my bin nor my cupboard." The fable of the ant and the fly. Now, we have to look at the two characters, the ant and the fly, and ask why Aesop would choose to study these two characters. And a lot of the details are given to us in the fable, what's important about them. Again, if you live in a city or in a suburb where people work very hard to keep insects away from the houses, you might not see many ants or flies. But where we live on the farm, we have tons of ants and flies, and we get to know a lot about them because we see them so much. We get to see how they live and what they do. And we probably pay more attention to insects and animals and plants than others do who live in cities or suburbs where there aren't as many. Ants, of course, live in the ground. But what ants are known for is always working. As soon as the weather warms up in the spring and all through the summer, ants can always be found working. They're always doing something. whole colonies of ants. You can find whole lines of ants carrying food, or um, if anything is left on the ground, the ants will get it in just a minute. And the ants are always working, 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 working. They're always busy, the ants. And as the ant says, flies are just always annoying. They're always where they shouldn't be, um, bothering animals, bothering people, flying in food, flying around. And people do their best to try and kill them. Flies are a nuisance, and um, the ants are symbols of wisdom. In fact, I want to read a passage from the Bible, the book of Proverbs. In Proverbs chapter 6, the writer of Proverbs, who is King Solomon, says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise." Go to the ant. If you want to learn wisdom, Solomon said, go to the ant. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, no overseer or ruler, provides her meat in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, no overseer or ruler, provides her meat in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. And so the ant is shown to us, even in the book of Proverbs, as a symbol, an example of wisdom, working when it's time to work, storing up for the future, and then enjoying the safety and provision of having worked when it was time to work, when the time comes when no one can work. Again, if you live in a city or in a suburb, it's just a little different because your parents, for example, may work all year round just the same. They may leave in the morning and come home at night, and it doesn't matter whether it's summertime or winter or spring or fall. Work is just always the same. But on the farm, there's only certain times when food can be grown. Here where we live, we can grow food almost year round, but in the wintertime, the gardens close up. And if you want to eat in the winter and you want to eat from your own farm, you have to produce that food in the summer and this fall. Because in the wintertime, you can't produce any food. And so there's a time to work, and then there's a time to eat what you've produced by working when it was time to work. And the ant is an example of a smart worker who works when it's time to work and then never has to worry about being hungry when the time comes when no work can be done. Go to the ant, consider her ways, and be wise. The ant compares his life to that of the fly and points out that in the wintertime, what happens to the flies? They all die, right? Most flies die once the weather gets cold. And the ant looks at the fly and says, "How foolish. Don't you know the cold weather's coming? Why don't you prepare for it? All your kind just die when the weather changes. We ants, we're working in the summer. We're doing what we should be doing, and then when the winter comes, we're ready for it. We're wise. You flies are foolish." And the fly is just boasting about all of the fancy things that he enjoys, but he really doesn't enjoy any of them, as the ant explains. The fly boasts about how he goes to all the great feasts and sits on the heads of emperors and kings and lands on the altars of the gods. And that may be true, but as the ant says, when he does so, they're swinging at him to try and kill him. And they often do kill him. So it's not that flies are welcome in those places. They're risking their lives when they fly into those places. And so we have a comparison here of two different kinds of people. A boastful, arrogant person who really doesn't tell the truth about his situation and boasts about things that really aren't his. And then in time is found to be suffering and struggling because all of the things that he was boasting about turned out to be false and didn't help him in the end. Whereas the ant is an example of the person who's just doing his job, using his time wisely, and when difficult times come, he's ready for them. Now, we don't have to read this and understand it only as a story about food and, actually eating and working. We can also read this with a more philosophical understanding and say, there are times in our lives when we all face adversity, when we all face difficulty, when we all face temptations. And every day, if we are living in a time when we have peace and leisure to study and learn, to practice virtue, to discipline ourselves, we can prepare for those times of difficulty that come. And they come to all of us. We all know we're going to have difficult times in life. We're all going to face trials. We're all going to have to go through difficult times when we're tempted. And today is the time to prepare for those days. Those days are like the winter. Just as we can't grow food in the winter and the winter comes and all of a sudden we're tested and we're forced to struggle without food. When difficult times in life come, any kind of difficult time, we're going to be tested in the same way, but not with food. Maybe we're not going to have enough wisdom to make a good decision. Maybe we're not going to be disciplined enough to resist the temptation. Maybe we're not going to be ready for the death of someone we love, and it's going to have a very bad effect on our lives. Maybe we're not going to be able to handle a difficult time when we don't have money and we're going to be tempted to steal. Now is the time to study and pray and train ourselves so that when those times come, we do have the wisdom and the self-control and the discipline to be able to handle those difficult times. So we can see the fly as like an arrogant person, always fooling around, always silly, never thinking about the future, never thinking about times of difficulty or trials that might come, just always playing and wasting time. And an ant is like a wise person who's using the time to study and pray and grow in virtue and holiness. And then winter is like the time of testing that comes, the hour of temptation when difficulties come to us. And we can be like the fly, never ready, never prepared, always boasting and silly. Or we can be like the ant who uses his time wisely and gets ready when it's time to get ready. So in your studies, for example, as children, this is the time for you to get ready for life. Adult life is difficult. You may see your parents go through difficult times. Adult life is very difficult. We all face trials. You never have any idea what trials you may face. And now is the time to study and prepare for them so that when they come, you can be ready and you can resist temptation and overcome evil and and merit God's blessing for um, for not yielding to temptation or not being overcome by difficulties. Now is the time to live like the ant, to go to the ant, to consider his ways and be wise, who having no overseer, no guide, no ruler, no one telling him what to do, no one tells the ants what to do, and yet they're working and preparing for the time of difficulty that comes, the winter time, which is a symbol of difficulty and trial and temptation and adversity, danger. And we can't know what's coming, but we can use the time that we have to prepare for it. If we're sober and smart and we use our time well, we can be like the ant and get ready rather than being like the fly and fooling around and imagining that things are better for us than they really are. So there's a lot in this fable, as you can see, a lot to think about. We can think about it in a number of different ways. Simply, we can think of it as a good lesson about working and being responsible. We can see it as a warning against boasting and being arrogant and not realizing that the things we boast about really aren't true. But we can also look into it and see an even deeper message that the winter time is a symbol of dangerous times or difficult times in life, and the summertime is a symbol of time today to make good use of the opportunities that God gives us to study and prepare so that when those difficult times come, we're ready for them. So I'll leave you again with the words of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, or overseer, or ruler, provides her meat in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. So be like the ant, working when it's time to work, not boasting, and ready when difficult times come. This, I believe, is the message of the fable of the ant and the fly. As I said, though, there's a lot in this fable, so study it on your own. And if you see anything else in there that I didn't mention that you think might be important, or if you have any other thoughts or examples that you can think of, any other Bible passages that you think help us to understand this fable, maybe lives of the saints or examples from stories or movies that you know about, share those stories with us and post on the community or send me an email. I'd really like to know your thoughts and hear if you think there's anything that you can think of that helps to understand this fable better. I hope that's a helpful start for your study of the fable of the ant and the fly. Now it's your turn to read it and think about it, meditate on it, and see how you can use it in your life and encourage others to learn from these fables and enjoy the wisdom that they offer us. I hope that's helpful. God bless your studies.